Once we looked back in time from the future, we came to realize that the future turned out to be way bigger than we ever expected it would.
The key to figuring out the future is, when are these trends going to become real? When are we going to have self-driving trucks and self-driving cars? When are we going to have flying cars? When are we going to have drone delivery vehicles?
The big question is, when does all of this come together? When does this happen? Nobody really knows. We know the trends are accelerating. We know the speed of change of technology is coming to the industry.
The future today is all about timing. You know the trends which are unfolding. The biggest challenge is, when do they become real?
The challenge with any new technology, any new idea, any new form of science is the timing issue. When does it become real? When do we jump in? When do we know it's worthwhile of our investment?
And most people tend to overestimate the rate of change that will occur on a 2-year basis. We underestimate how much change will occur on a 10-year basis.
The future happens slowly and then all at once. Don't let yourself be subjected to surprise.
There's some useful guidance with what is called the Gartner hype cycle.
Gartner is a technology research firm that said, look, any new technology which comes to the forefront, it goes through this hype cycle. It appears with the technology trigger. We hit what we call the peak of inflated expectations, excessive hype and hysteria. And then people realize it's going to take a little bit of work to make it happen. And we hit the trough of disillusionment. Eventually, we figure out how to make it work, and things mature and change happens. And it hits the slope of enlightenment, eventually the plateau of productivity. What you need to do is figure out when you jump on the curve with any new idea, any new technology.
We have a whole bunch of trends out there, each one of which might be massively transformative, disruptive. And they sort of percolate along for a while. And then any particular trend at any particular time can suddenly go supernova. And all of a sudden you sit back and go, whoa, where did that come from? I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't aligned for that. You need to have a structure, a capability, an agility, a flexibility to suddenly align yourself to any particular trend as it becomes extremely fast moving.
And that's why my mantra has always been, think big, start small, scale fast. Futurist Jim Carroll from the virtual broadcast studio in my home. I've been running a leadership series entitled Notable Keynotes, Lessons in Leadership for Your Eventual Post-Pandemic Recovery. And what I've been doing is I've been taking a look at some of the most significant or most fascinating events from a 25-year career on stage with some of the world's largest, most sophisticated organizations, and the guidance I've provided them, or the context of the situation in which they brought me for a leadership talk on how to align to the future. And one of my fascinating events, which I want to profile today, is the moment in time that the Wall Street Journal brought me in for a leadership session focused on what we need to do to align to a world in which volatility is the new normal. Here's the context. We had the global economic meltdown of 2008, 2009, and business leaders worldwide were in a funk. People had lost sight of the trends which would redefine their future. They lost sight of the opportunities that were enveloping their world, because obviously, many of them were focused on crisis recovery. Many of them were focused on the things they needed to do to ensure that they could survive this tumultuous period of time. And I actually spent a lot of time on a lot of stages with a talk about what you need to do to align to that new reality, just as I did with the Wall Street Journal. And I got to tell you, it was an absolute thrill to be invited in by this organization, one of the most prestigious business publications on the planet. Well, what was the context of what I talked about? Well, I went in and I talked about a disease that I first identified after the dot-com collapse in 2001 that I called aggressive indecision. I wrote it into my column for a Canadian newspaper called the Globe and Mail, and I identified what was happening with organizations. I want you to start out by watching this short clip. After the dot-com bust, I noticed a dangerous tendency with my clients. They were very indecisive about the future. They were kind of going, we're not quite certain when we're going to see a global economic recovery. We're going to hold off on investing in the future. We're going to, just postpone those decisions. And I coined a phrase, I wrote about this in my newspaper column. My clients were becoming aggressively indecisive. They were suffering from aggressive indecision.
Think about that phrase. What I noticed happening was we're not going to make this capital investment. We're not going to invest in the future. We're not going to invest in technology because we're not quite certain when we are going to see a global economic recovery.
And is that what you find yourself suffering from right now as we're in this pandemic-oriented world? Look, we don't have a lot of clarity on what is unfolding. We really don't know what's going to happen through 2021. We know there are signs of hope. We know there's vaccine. We know there is a pathway out of this. But I'm finding a lot of organizations are once again suffering from aggressive indecision. I witness it in the calls that I get from clients, exploratory calls, where people are deciding, well, we're not going to do that right now. We're going to wait until we have clarity. We're going to wait until we have more certainty on how things are going to unfold. The fascinating thing is when you get into this mindset of aggressive indecision, what happens is you miss out on the opportunities that define your future. And what I spoke about when the Wall Street Journal had me in was a study that was done at General Electric as to what happened in previous economic downturns. Watch this clip.
GE, the head of innovation, did a study. He looked at what organizations did during previous periods of economic decline. What they found was 60% of the organizations, they sort of muddled through. They did what they had to do. They cut costs. They managed travel. They fired consultants. 30% of the organizations didn't make it. They went bankrupt. They got bought out. 10% became breakthrough performers because they specifically decided, despite economic uncertainty, right now is the time to invest. Right now is the time to make big, bold decisions.
Think about that. Right now is the time to make big, bold decisions. What history has taught us is that it's those organizations who make the conscious decision that despite economic volatility, despite a world of relentless uncertainty, despite a world in which we don't know exactly what is going to happen and when it's going to unfold, the time to invest is right at that very moment. That is what history taught us through that GE study. 60% of the organizations, they sort of muddled their way through. 30% didn't make it. They were bought out, they went bankrupt, they didn't survive. But 10% became breakthrough performers. That's me right here in this home broadcast studio. I decided early on, way back in March, that I was going to be in this virtual world for quite some time to come, and I was going to build the world's best, most sophisticated keynote speaker broadcast studio because I was not going to suffer from aggressive indecision. Are you suffering from that dreaded disease? And look, this is not new. I actually first started talking about this way back in 2003 when SAP had me in for a global event. And I was talking to 600 technology executives about what was going on in the world. And I was looking around me at how many people were indecisive, and I went on stage and I was on fire. I was actually kind of angry. And the passion just poured out of me as I spoke about this. And I'm going to play about 60 seconds of this clip so you can really understand the mindset of what happens with aggressive indecision.
I was looking at these frogs and I was thinking, that's it. They are sitting there. They are focused on the short-term threat. They are looking at the short-term world around them. They are thinking about what is going on in the here and now, and they're not realizing what is going on in the long term. The long-term trend is if they don't get out of that road, there's going to be a big problem and it's going to be ugly. How many of you have lost your ability to take risks? You've lost your courage to innovate. Bring it back. Restore the ability to make mistakes. It is better to have something go wrong than at all. Isn't it time we get excited about the future again? Isn't it time we get innovative again? Isn't it time we start thinking again about how wonderful it could be? Isn't it time we start exploring the boundaries again in terms of the capabilities and the opportunities? Isn't it time we wake up, realize the benefit of initiative? It's my little guy Thomas, when he was 2, 3, he wanted a hockey blocker. And we said, no, Thomas, you're not going to get one. You're going to grow and you're going to outgrow this thing.
I went on to tell the story of my son and how he was taking initiative despite uncertainty. I should share that clip with you, and I'll do that in the blog post. But here's the thing: I was on fire. I was so upset by the indecision that I was seeing surround me everywhere I went that I coined on stage the phrase aggressive indecision, and I find that people are still suffering from it today. I went on to write a book around that very story called What I Learned from Frogs in Texas. It became a business parable. The thing is, look, we know we're going into this period where we will come out the other side of this pandemic. We know we're going to be entering in a situation in which the opportunities will start to come about. And the thing is, you need to start preparing for that now. As a leader, you need to make sure your organization is focused on the future. As an individual, you need to make sure that you have the optimistic mindset that you are going to be a breakthrough performer. The challenge is this. What has happened in the last many months is we have developed what I call our pandemic era belief system. We've developed these attitudes and mindsets with respect to where we are. And I think that's causing a lot of us to cloud our judgment on what we can be doing. And I wrote about this in a blog post quite some time ago, but I will share these issues with you right now, because I think what you need to do is you really need to challenge your pandemic era belief system. What's going on? Well, a lot of you are suffering from the situation that you think we will soon get back to normal. And we use the phrase new normal. I hate that phrase. I despise that phrase. We're not going back to the world as it was pre-COVID. What has happened here is we're really defining a new world because there's been so much behavioral change. There's been so much economic change. There's been so much structural industry change, e-commerce, telehealth, take any industry, and we have compressed 10 years worth of change into but 6 months. So everything has changed. We're not going back to where we were. We're going back to a new and different economy. I think for a lot of you, your desire is getting ahead of your reality. You want to get back to where you were. And so desire is fueling your perception of what you can do to get there. Look, it's going to be a long, slow road back. I know we're all excited about the vaccine. I know we're all excited. We're finally seeing some rays of hope. I know we're all excited. We're starting to see some signs of clarity with respect to political insanity that has enveloped our world for quite some time. But it is going to be a long, slow road back. For some of you, accepting our new reality seems like an admission of defeat. It can be if I'm in a situation in which my world has fundamentally changed. My old business model doesn't work. I've got to carve out a new business model. I failed. You haven't. This is a series of absolutely unforeseen circumstances, obviously. And my mindset has been, it's not a failure that has happened here. It's not an admission of defeat. It's a foundation for action. That is what is really defining us. Maybe you're in a situation in which you aren't understanding that everything has changed. The word I'm using with all of my clients is transformative. That's what's really happening here. The trends which have occurred are massively transformative. Retail is not going back to where it was before. It has changed in such a significant fashion. It's staggering. The world of healthcare is not going back to where it was. What has happened here is we have witnessed a massive behavioral change with patients, with doctors, with hospitals. You can take any single industry and you can see the signs of significant transformative change. Some of you suffer from the issue that you don't accept that everything has changed. And you've got to get through that acceptance issue fast, because that's the only way you can position yourself for success over on the other side. Some of you have an inability to comprehend what has actually changed. That's why there's guys like me, futurists, trends experts, subject matter experts, who will take you into the future of your industry and help you comprehend what is going on, what is happening, and what you need to do to align to that reality. Some of you are suffering from the issue that, you've got a belief that you can simply return to what you did before. It's not going to be like that. Look, if one thing has changed with the pandemic, it's that organizations have learned something new about the issue of speed. For years, I've preached the mantra that what we need to do is think big, start small, scale fast, and that the future belongs to those who are fast. You think about how quickly entire industries realigned their reality to deal with the crisis. Speed is everything. Speed is the new metric. Speed is the success factor. And that in itself means that we are not going back to where we were before, but we're going into a new and fundamentally different economy with different business models, with different issues of speed. Some of you are suffering from the issue of fear of confronting the truth. It's change. Everything's different. And if you cannot confront the truth, you face a pretty ugly reality out on the other side, unless you begin to work to reinvent right now. Some of you feel helpless in the face of absolutely overwhelming change. And this is where I talk about the 7 stages of economic grief, or the 7 stages of COVID grief. Think about the emotions that we've gone through. When this thing hit, we went through anger, shock, denial, bewilderment. I was there for about 24 hours and I decided I was going to move to the acceptance stage right away, and I was going to begin building this virtual broadcast studio because the only way I would survive and thrive was to get ahead of the game. You've got to move faster along those 7 stages of economic or COVID grief. You could be in a situation in which confirmation bias is clouding your judgment. You want to believe those who tell you what you want to hear. You don't want to listen to those who are telling you the truth. And if that's your reality, you need to check your reality. Last but not least, sadly, some of you have fallen prey to the cult of delusion, the conspiracy of idiocy, this strange and crazy world which envelops us today. Enough said. Your future is probably over anyway. And the thing is, when the Wall Street Journal had me in to talk to business leaders about this issue of aggressive indecision, I focused on what we needed to do to move through it. We find ourselves in the exact same circumstances today. You need to challenge yourself to adapt to the future, to adapt to the trends which surround us, to accept your reality, and become one of those in that 10% of breakthrough performers who are doing the things that you need to do to redefine your future and accelerate into the opportunities that are going to obviously come and which are emerging right now with our eventual post-pandemic future. I have summarized a lot of this information on my website. You can find under the Insights tab a whole bunch of posts, videos, observations on what you can be doing from an innovation, disruption, leadership, and transformation perspective to align yourself to your post-COVID future. Take a look. You'll find it at jimcarroll.com. And I'm going to close off with this clip. This is New Orleans in 2012. I'm invited in by a massive global conference to speak to this issue of aggressive indecision. Give it a watch.
Ask yourself if you are indecisive about the future. If you are indecisive about the investments that you should be making. Indecisive about the investment and management decisions you should be making. You know what I observed happened in a previous recession? People became extremely indecisive. And I coined a phrase. I said that what is happening, people are becoming aggressively indecisive. Are you suffering from aggressive indecision? I'm not going to make this capital investment. I'm not going to pursue this new strategy. I'm not going to go to WEFTech with a mindset that's going to evolve a lot of opportunities for innovation because I'm just not quite certain about when we are going to see an economic recovery and things are going to be easier. But here's something that we have learned. A fellow at GE, responsible for innovation, he studied what organizations did in previous economic downturns. He looked at the oil shock of the 70s, the downturn of the 80s, the 1990s downturn, the dot-com bust. They seemed to come in 10-year waves. And what he found was that 60% of the organizations barely survived. They did what they had to do. They cut costs, they managed costs, they muddled their way through. 30% didn't make it. But 10% became breakthrough performers because they decided, despite economic uncertainty, despite not having clarity on when economic volatility is going to disappear, their decision was that now is the time to innovate. Now is the time to adapt. Now is the time to be doing the things that we need to do to position ourselves for the future. Ask yourself, if you are suffering from aggressive indecision, you need to change that attitude. When you go out on the show floor and when you go to the education sessions, you need to be in a mindset that there is a wealth of knowledge that is occurring here, and you need to adapt a lot of these ideas.
And hey, Futurist Jim Carroll, we're back. Everything you just saw happened here in my virtual broadcast studio. And like I said, since the crisis began, I decided right away that I had to work to go into the acceptance stage. I had to reinvent. I had to rebuild my future because I'm going to be stuck in this basement for quite some time. And what I've done is I've developed this absolutely fascinating capability which brings virtual stages, consistent leadership insight, transformation trends, disruptive insight in terms of what is happening in your future. And people are beginning to aligned to it. I'm going to be speaking to a group of pizza franchise owners next week about the future of food, future of restaurants, future of retail. Early January, I'm going to be speaking at an economic development conference about how a region can accelerate itself into the future. In early January, I'm also going to be speaking to several hundred agriculture executives about the future of farming. For 25 years, I spent my time on stage with organizations, helping some of the world's most fascinating organizations, from NASA to the Wall Street Journal to Disney to the World Bank to Johnson & Johnson to Pfizer, about what they need to do to align themselves to a world in which the future belongs to those who are fast. There's a tremendous amount of insight on my webpage. And specifically, there's a lot of insight about how I'm doing these virtual shows. You might want to check it out, because all you're doing right now is you're utilizing a lot of really pathetic Zoom speakers who show up like a hostage in a hostage video and speak in a whole bunch, in front of a whole bunch of books on a bookshelf and deliver you stale content. What you just saw can accelerate your online event into a whole new world. So check it out at virtual.jimcarroll.com. Thank you for watching.